I have a very unusual and strategic way of looking at story and looking at creativity that comes from that early training. And what I do with every single person is the same thing, which is we step back from the words on the page and we look at the project. What are you trying to do here? Why are you trying to do it? Why do you care about it? There's usually some seed of caring deep in a writer's heart that they are not aware of or haven't articulated. And if they can tap into it, they can often bust through that roadblock.
Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode, as well as free training on creativity, over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Jennie Nash. Jennie Nash is the founder and chief creative officer of Author Accelerator, a strategic book coaching service that offers the sustained editorial support writers need to complete their projects and make a powerful impact on their target audience. For 10 years, writers serious about reaching readers have trusted Jennie to coach their projects from inspiration to publication, landing top New York agents and book deals with houses such as Scribner, Schuster, and Hachette. Jennie is the author of 8 books in 3 genres. She taught for 13 years in the UCLA Extension Writers Program and speaks at writing conferences all over the country. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Jennie today. So welcome, Jennie.
Thank you. It's a very good to be here. You asked me when we first came on how my morning was, and hearing that intro, actually had a client sell a book in a giant preempt offer this morning. So that's a good day.
Awesome. That's a good win. Nice way to start your morning.
I know, that was a good day.
So share, apart from you authors kind of winning deals, tell me what else is going on in your world just now.
Yeah, and authors winning deals is the one end of the spectrum, right? When we're talking about people writing and raising their voice and speaking their truth and getting their messages out and living a creative life, we're talking about a wide range of things that can qualify as a success. And so a lot of what I do is help people on that whole journey to do it well, to do it with intention, to do it with support and accountability. I don't know why we think that we need to be creative by ourselves or to be creative in a vacuum or alone, that somehow that's going to take away our power or take away our voice. So a lot of what we do at Author Accelerator is to give people that strategic support so they can bring their work to life and bring their books to life. And the thing that we're doing most recently along those lines is we're actually helping train people to be book coaches to help writers do that work. So it's very meta. We're training
Fantastic.
people to help the writers do the thing. So we're very excited about our book coach certification program. So that's some of what we have going on.
Fantastic. So take us back to the beginning. How did you get started as an author? Where did it all begin for you?
Oh my gosh. Well, it began in 4th grade for me when we had a project in our class where we got to submit poetry and we were going to make a book, an actual physical book. And I recently moved and I found the book, and it's this incredible thing because in my mind it has this mythological status. It was my first published work. And it's the stapled together cardboard and glue thing. But the idea that I could write something and the thing that really attracted me, I remember this very clearly, was my name would be on it. My name would be on this thing I made. And to me, that was just very powerful. And that's where it all started.
So do you come from a family of authors, of writers? Did you have in your kind of genes, I guess, in getting into the publishing world?
I do. My father was a professor at the university in Santa Barbara, California. environmental studies. And we had a house, a typical California ranch house, where at the end of the house, he had a study. And he wrote books. He wrote a great number of books about wilderness in America. But the memory that I have is of the typewriter. The typewriter, he would be in his study typing, and the sound of the typewriter, and that sound held so much promise for me, because I wasn't allowed to bother him. But I knew that what that sound meant, that it meant he was making something. It was coming from his head, and it was going into a form that other people were going to be able to connect with. And I understood that very intuitively. And so I think when I had that chance in fourth grade, I was like, oh, it's my turn.
You're following in that family footsteps. And as you kind of went and published your first book, tell us about that very first book that you did. And obviously you've had many books subsequent, after that. But what was that? Take us through that process of writing that first, publishing that first book.
I sort of hate to tell the story because it flies in the face of what everybody says about publishing. It was just very easy for me. I was a young woman, college graduate, working at a magazine in New York City, and we had a number of very prominent writers on our staff, and as columnists, it was a sort of embarrassment of riches, the people around me, and I was the lowest person on the totem pole that you could possibly be. My job was to edit the captions on photos, and that was the level that I was. But I had the opportunity to write an essay for a magazine, and it was a whole page, and I did that. And one of the agents of one of our writers saw it and said, you should write a book about that. I will represent you. And that's what happened. So my first book was a book about getting married, actually. And it was, published by Crown, excerpted in Cosmopolitan magazine. I mean, it was sort of ridiculous. So
a lot of authors, when I speak to them there, and they've had many, many books, they're sometimes a little bit embarrassed by that first book, either from because it's not the topic that they're known for now, or their writing was obviously a very, very early stage. How do you feel now looking back about that first book? Have you made peace with it? Are you really happy, with that first book?
I love that question because it gets at what creativity is. Creativity is not a thing where we strive for perfection and we reach perfection and that's it and we're done. Creativity, as your podcast is all about, is a way of being in the world. It's a way of living. It's a way of seeing. It's a way of doing. And so I used to be embarrassed because I used to have that thought like, oh, I'm 54 years old now. 54-year-old me would never write that book, would never write about that topic, would never write like that. But on the other hand, 25-year-old me, that's what I made. That's the thing that came out. That was the start for me. That was where it began. And why should I look with embarrassment? I mean, my gosh, if we were not growing and learning and deepening our understanding of ourselves and the world and how we make things, it wouldn't be fun to be alive, right?
Absolutely. So, and as you were kind of working on, even on those first few books, how were you working to kind of develop your craft as a writer? We'll put the business and the publishing and all that side to one side for now, but just the craft, was it just a case of just reading a lot and writing a lot, or did you have someone, a mentor, a coach in those early days to help you?
I had a lot of wise elders, I would say, and my training at the magazine where I worked was invaluable. It's part of what I try to teach people today. And that training was about what I would just call seeing in story. What is a good story? What makes a good story? How do you see it? How do you recognize it? What are the boundaries of it? How do you frame it? And at the magazine we work, you're churning copy out every month. You're writing these pieces are coming in, they're going out, and you become somewhat callous to the fact that you might have a 3,000 word piece and suddenly it has to be 800 words. That's no big deal. You just make it work. Or the opposite, maybe a 800 word piece has to be made 2,000 words and you have very little time to do it. So it was this idea of not being precious about your work. I learned craft. The idea that there's an effectiveness, that creative work can be effective. It can have an outcome. It can have an endpoint that's good. And there's a subjective nature to that. I think so many people get stuck with their own creative work where they think, it's mine and I made it and it's precious and I can't change it. I can't let anybody touch it or see it. And even if I let somebody buy it or pay me money for it, it's going to somehow hurt it. And so my training in craft was really that idea that those things can sometimes make something better. Making it 800 words instead of 3,000 can make it better. Turning it from this to that can improve it. That it's looking at all the sides and looking at what is the point of this thing. And that training, that early understanding of what a story is and how to make it work was how I learned my craft. And I'm so grateful for that training, because I see so many people come at writing from the direction of what I would call beautiful words, a beautiful imagery, the aesthetic angle of it, and the emotion of it, and they're not able to make that leap into that place where they can see it as an object or a useful thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, it's and that's kind of, I wanted to pick up next on. You mentioned these advisors that you had around you. I'm guessing those included agents and editors and those people. As you were starting to write more and to publish more books, how much of an impact did these advisors around you have in terms of the core ideas of what each of those books were going to be around? Did you very much sense, okay, every time you finished a book, you already had an idea for what the next book was, or were you taking soundings from other people around you as to where you should be going next, what topics, what subjects you should cover next?
Yes, there is a lot of that in writing where you're going to get that, and I did indeed get that. And I think part of learning to be a writer is learning when to listen to that and learning when to ignore it. How do you know? For instance, I wrote a memoir about my experience with breast cancer, and I was a very young survivor, and I learned that I had cancer because a friend of mine was actually dying. And to me, it was like a giant neon sign. This is a story. This is a great story. A young mother lives and a young mother dies. And to me, that had all the makings of what I had been trained to see as a great story. And my agent said, you can't sell a breast cancer memoir. The market is saturated. Nobody needs another breast cancer memoir. Don't write that book. And I ignored her and wrote the book, and it had an excellent outcome. So that was an instance where I did not take the advice of somebody, but I still value that advice because it allows you to know what you think. Like if you react against that, if she says that to me and I say, oh no, you're wrong, I think this is different, I think it's unique, I can see how this is going to be in the world, that allows me to define that for myself and frame that for myself. So I don't object to advice I don't take, or if somebody doesn't take my advice. I think it's all learning to hear your own, what's important in your own head and to your own self. But it goes back to what I was saying before. People are so afraid sometimes to let anybody into their process at all because they think it's going to ruin their vision. And so I find that it strengthens the vision. And if somebody were to say the opposite, this is a great idea and here's how you might tweak it or shift it, and it resonates in my head and I think, yeah, that's also useful. So it's a combination of getting that advice, but learning to listen to your own self.
Having that being able to have that kind of centered self of yeah, I mean that's a really hard thing to do. Is to get trusting that instinct inside you, just kind of taking that information in, using it as useful input, but then having a strong enough character to be able to say, okay, that's great, and yes, I may go with that, or I may triangulate between these two things, or actually I'm gonna thank you, but I'm going to ignore everything everyone's saying, and I just believe in this 100%, and I'm just going to plow on. But you tell me, you had an incident that happened.
Yeah, I think of that great. I wish I could remember the artist. I can't remember the artist, but there's a singer, a songwriter whose agent said, "I want you to write a love song. That's what's going to sell." And she wrote a song. The lyric is, "I'm not going to write you a love song." It's a great hit. It was a great hit. And so she was reacting against somebody telling her what to do. And, so I think developing that strength of what you know is a good story, what you know is your story to tell, what you know is the right story to tell, that's the whole thing. And people get so caught up on craft.
Yeah.
And, when people hear that I'm a book coach and then I run a book coaching company, they'll ask me things like, "Oh, should I be on Twitter or should I be on Instagram? Or should I participate in this agent contest or this other agent contest? Or what should I do on my blog or my newsletter?" These what I would call tactical questions. And I'm like, forget all that. Spend all your time. What are you writing? Why are you writing it? Who's going to care? What is it? How are you going to develop the habits to do that and to finish it and to get it in the world? And they want to leap over that whole thing to the tactical endpoint, and that's what I fight against every day.
I think Austin Kleon had a great expression. He said, "A lot of people want to be the noun without doing the verb. They want to be writers without writing. They want to be singers without singing. They want to be actors without acting. They want to be speakers without speaking. And you have to do the verb. It's a doing thing."
And he's amazing, Austin Kleon. He works in this space where we're talking about even his his most well-known work, Steal Like an Artist, is about scaffolding, taking input, and so that you can sharpen your own focus. I love his work. He's so interesting.
So you were getting all these books out. You've been publishing third book, fourth book, fifth book, sixth book, and then something interesting happened when you went to do the seventh book. It didn't quite turn out like you thought. So tell us about that experience.
It was such a failure. It really was. It was one of those just business failures where the truth is I got too big for my britches, and I thought I deserve more money, more power, all the things. And my agent agreed, and we set out to sell my would have been my fourth novel. And we wanted it to be a breakout book. So I was a mid-list writer. A mid-list writer is exactly what it sounds like. It's not a debut, new, shiny, newest thing author, and it's not a bestseller. You're sort of in the middle. And it's kind of a terrible place to be on the one hand, but in retrospect, it's also a lot of people would like to be there. But I was in this space where I was like, no, I want to break through, and I want to play in the big leagues. And so we set this book up as we're looking for a big advance. And my existing publisher actually offered me a 3-book deal at the mid-list writer price point. And I turned it down to go out and try to get a bigger deal from somebody else. And it was a really quite terrible morning. My agent set the auction, and an auction is you only do that if you have enough interest from multiple editors to warrant a bidding competition. And we had that, and we set this auction. And on the morning of the auction, nobody bid. It was crickets. And it was horrible. And it was basically them saying there was nothing wrong with the book per se, but we couldn't get the support that we were looking for at the level that we were looking for it. And that moment, that day, was not actually what I considered the failure part. The failure part was that I then still had that hubris. And I was like, forget all them. They don't know what they're talking about. There's this new thing called self-publishing. I have such a great reputation and name, and I've done all these book signings and all these bookstores. I will do this myself. I will bring it out myself. And I very quickly brought that book out myself. I made every possible mistake in the book that one could make as a self-publisher. And it was a complete and total embarrassing flop. And I leave it up for sale because it's almost just a reminder to myself and to other people. Part of the reason that I'm good at what I do is I've been through that. I did that. I made that very deal on the table because I didn't know. There was so much I didn't know. And a huge part of what I didn't know is what it takes to build a platform as an author and to really be connected to your readers. I thought that I was, and maybe it was that we were on the cusp of publishing really changing, where writers could really directly connect with their readers. But I was really missing the boat on what it took.
So after you'd had that experience, I'm interested now when you give advice. I'm sure one of the very common questions you get from authors is, should I go with a traditional publisher? Should I self-publish? Should I do this kind of hybrid thing that we can hear about now?
Yeah.
You've had this benefit of experience of going through different ways and putting out different ways. What are the kind of the questions that you ask them back in order to assess which option might be right for them?
Yeah, I do get that question a lot, and it is very confusing, and there's new ways coming up all the time. And sadly, there's people taking advantage of authors all the time as well, and taking advantage of the desperation that we have to have our words read. And you have to be very careful how to navigate these processes. And for me, it boils down to a couple key things. And it has to do with what traditional publishing does well versus what self-publishing can do well. And some of those things are speed. Traditional publishing is extremely slow, very, very, very slow. The book that I just told you was sold today is slated to come out in summer 2020. So we're talking in February 2019. So a year and a half from now. That's really slow. And for product development, that's really slow. So if you're writing something that you want is timely, you want it out faster, perhaps it's part of a series and your readers are waiting, you may be better served to not go with a traditional publisher. So speed is one thing. Creative control is a huge thing. A partnership that a writer makes with a traditional publisher is in fact a partnership. You're buying a team of professionals who are going to design your cover and choose your paper and set your price point and come up with a marketing plan and that whole thing. And you need to be part of that team, which means you don't necessarily get to say, I want my cover to be orange, unless you're Stephen King, and odds are good that you're not Stephen King. So the ability to have creative control, and sometimes when writers hear that, they instantly think, oh, I could never do that. I have a image for my cover. I want to be able to run a special price promotion on Valentine's Day. I have to keep creative control, in which case they need to go a different direction than self-publishing. And then the third really key difference is how the money flows and when it flows. And that can be very complicated, but in certain people, for certain situations, they may actually make more money self-publishing. But the reason for so many people, it's even a decision, is that there's a sense that traditional publishers, sometimes called legacy publishing, is the feather in your cap, right? It's you have that imprimatur of success. You've been chosen, you've been vetted, and you have been picked. And there is a very deep need in a lot of writers to be picked. And if you have a book that's published by, say, Simon & Schuster, it doesn't matter if your book sells 200 copies. You get to always say that your book was published by Simon & Schuster, which everybody knows is shorthand for I was picked.
Yeah.
And in self-publishing, the only metric that matters is sales. So it has to be that you have enough sales to warrant, in terms of what success looks like from the outside. That's what I should say. So the only measure of success of a self-published book is I sold X number of copies. Because anybody could self-publish. We could write a book together right now and publish it tomorrow. So what's to differentiate that from somebody who's spent years on their story and their craft? So the only differentiator is sales. So that's the rub, where people still often want to be picked.
So now you have this really interesting career. You've been a successful writer. You are a successful writer, and you changed slightly where you started coaching other writers. So When I think of coaches, I think that you have you have life coaches, you have business coaches. Tell me, what is involved in being a writing coach? Are you just working with people on the craft? Or are you helping them navigate all these things we were just speaking about there, about publishing, which option, and publicists and marketing? What's your role there?
It's a great question. And a book coach is, I like to say, it's like having a personal trainer for your writing life. So you're going to help set your goal and make a plan for getting to that goal. We're going to help support you on your way to that goal. We're going to help you pass the roadblocks of doubt, helping with your motivation, helping, for you to increase your skill as you go. So it's a combination of editorial feedback, what I would say is emotional support, and project management. So it's while you're writing, having somebody help you with those elements of the work. What people often forget is that writing a book is a massively big and complex intellectual undertaking. It is the number of skills you have to master, the number of worlds you have to understand, the things you have to navigate. Very, very complex. And why do people think that they know how to do that? And it's usually because all of us are, most of the people who are drawn to writing have been readers their whole life. They've been intimately connected with other people's output their whole life. Unlike, say, a surgeon, not a lot of people think, well, I could do surgery because I'm good with, I don't know what you would say, a knife. I mean, it's not the kind of thing people have very intimate connection with. So we don't go around saying, hey, give me that knife. I could fix your heart. But we do go around saying, oh, I could write a book because there's books in our bedrooms and there's books in our living rooms, and we buy books and we enjoy books and we're in books, and we think that the product is so seamless that we think, well, I could do that. How hard could it be? I've got stories in my head. I mean, we all have that. I have imagination. I always love that. I could do that. And then they get into it, and I see so many writers stuck. They're so stuck and they're so desperate because it's pretty easy to write 5 or 6 chapters. It's pretty easy to have a great idea. It's not at all easy to get from there to the end into publishable shape. So what a book coach is going to do is help you in all the ways that you need to get there, and all the things that you said: skill building, craft. Where are your strengths and your weaknesses? How can you improve this? What is your vision for this? Are you aiming toward that vision? How is your goal in terms of time management? How is the marketplace looking? All of those questions, all of those answers. So, for instance, the writer whose book sold today, I worked with her from zero, which is my favorite thing to do.
They haven't got any bad habits yet. They're still they're still impressionable.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's because I can add so much value at the beginning. And I always tell people, if you're at all interested in using a book coach, don't wait. The time to do it is at the beginning. And then you can go off on your own and do what you want. But as we spoke about before, people are very afraid about someone stealing their idea, or people say to me all the time, I just have to laugh. They want me to sign a non-disclosure that I'm not going to steal their idea. And I think if it were that easy, everybody would be a best-selling author. Your idea is worth nothing. So I sign because, they don't know yet, but I just think it's very funny because they have no idea.
So have you got any examples of especially for writers who, as you say, they get those first few chapters out? That's relatively straightforward because there's been bubbling in their mind maybe for many years. And then they hit the, I think Seth Godin calls it the dip, or the bump, or there's lots of different ways. The night of the dark, whatever. So was there a particular example that you have of a client who kind of got to that point, and how did you get them through that so that they didn't just give up and just say, no, it's too tough, it's too much, I can't do this?
So James, you're describing literally every single writer that comes to me ever. Even the people that come at the beginning of a project where I would say zero, it's because they've tried in their head they've tried to wrap their minds around it and they have not been able to, or maybe they're stuck at 5 or 6 chapters, or maybe they've written the whole book and it hasn't worked. I get now a lot of engagement to help with their writers because there's something's not going right. So it's always, I'm sort of the last stop. A book coach is sort of, for many people at this point, is kind of the last stop. They've tried all these other things. And the reason for that is because it's expensive. People don't want to invest if they don't have to. So what I do is I have a very unusual and strategic way of looking at story and looking at creativity that comes from that early training. And what I do with every single person is the same thing, which is we step back from the words on the page and we look at the project. What are you trying to do here? Why are you trying to do it? Why do you care about it? There's usually some seed of caring deep in a writer's heart that they are not aware of or haven't articulated. And if they can tap into it, they can often bust through that roadblock. So we step back and we look at, again, why are you doing this? Why does this matter to you? Who else is it going to matter to you? I'm actually reading Seth Godin's new book, This is Marketing, his brand new book. And I'm loving it because he's all about, for a business, you have to know what your audience needs and wants, and not just the surface level thing, like I need a faster, what goes fast? Car.
Faster car, faster widget.
Yeah, a faster thing. It's that's not it. It's like, what do they really need? How do they want to see themselves? What is your widget helping them to in terms of their identity and who they are? And this is actually the work that I do with people and that I train my coaches to do with people is don't tell me about your plot. Don't tell me about your character if it's fiction. Don't tell me about your argument if it's nonfiction. I have a guy who just came to me last week, a really high level leadership coach with some extraordinary Fortune 50 clients, and he has a whole system and strategy for helping them, some amazing successes. And he lays his book out to me. And I'm just like, no, nothing here is right. Nothing here is good, because it's all just this blah, 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 just surface like buzzwords. And, so that's the work that we do is like, okay, why are you in this business? Why do you care? Why are you good at it? Why are you better than your competitor? How is this any different from the 47 other books on leadership that are out there? And I will spend sometimes months on these questions and helping people really get down to it. And from that place emerges a structure usually. It's like form follows function. If we can understand what their purpose is and what their function is, and this is as true for a book about leadership as it is for a middle grade story about dragons. It's connecting the form of the thing, the shape of it, the structure of it with the meaning of it, the purpose of it. And it's not a way that we've been trained to talk. We've been trained to talk about creativity and writing as I shall unleash my powers and I shall unleash my imagination and the muse will visit me and I'll create this thing of meaning for people. Why should it work like that? I mean, it does for a very, very select few, what I would call native geniuses. But we've got this myth that that's the way it works, and it's not the way it works. It's logical, it's strategic, it's a project that you manage. It's getting down to, like I said, that marriage of what do you want to say and how are you going to say it? And I mean, it sounds, when I'm just saying it out loud, very simplistic, but it's just meaty and we're just in it and we're wrestling with it. And oftentimes the people that I'm helping, it's hard. They cry.
Yeah.
I mean, there's despair down there. And so it's the willingness to go there and to also have an actual structure or format to get them out of it. It's not just like we're going to go there and muck around forever. It's like, no, we have a purpose. We have something we need to do, which is write this book. So what is this book going to be? And so it's kind of the willingness to peel back those layers and peel them back and go in there and then come out with a plan.
But I mean, that thing of getting to why, I can't remember who's could paraphrase it now, but once you know your why, you can stuff any how. I think it was Nietzsche maybe said it. You can get through all these hows, whether it's about social media or the agent or the book deals or the auctions, all the other things. They'd be a bit like, but why? And I love the way that you were phrasing it, talking about those whys. It reminds me of that 5-year-old who just why? It's like
100%.
And even big companies like Toyota actually uses it. They call it the 5 whys, and they use this just to start drilling down, because the first 2 whys are usually pretty simple, and people have kind of almost got them off, and they repeat them in a parrot fashion because they think it's what it should. And it's when you get to the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th why it then becomes a little bit more challenging, and now you really start to get somewhere.
Well, that's right. And that's why I use a lot of the things that I learned from business and entrepreneurs and other endeavors to help writers, because I think publishing and writers have tend to sort of isolate themselves and think of it as a more precious work in some ways. But I think if we take that preciousness away, and people's creativity and their ideas and their imagination is precious to them, but it's not to the world. The work is to make it important to the world. And a lot of the ways that business tends to think about business is terribly effective in this realm. And, I love, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I can't think who said it either. But, I can rattle off the mission of my company. But when it really says, well, why does that matter to you? Why are you working? Why is that? You have to then think, oh, why am I? Well, because writing's cool and writing's good and writing's noble. And it's like, okay, but why? And pushing to tap into that thing. And what I love about this work is that there's always something. Nobody is called to write fiction or nonfiction, to write anything if they don't really have a reason to want to do it. There's other ways to spend your time.
And as you said, the mission statements, I was thinking, I read something the other day, Ed Catmull, who's founder of Pixar, said, we need to move from a time of having mission statements to having mission questions. Mission statements are just these we will be the number one provider of XYZ widgets. Boring. It doesn't drive anything. But if you frame things in terms of a question, it becomes much more expansive, much more open, much more. It sparks the curiosity there as well. So you mentioned something there about you now train other coaches to help other authors, so you can really start impacting and helping the lives of more authors. Can you take us through how that works?
Yeah, so my Author Accelerator is a company that we match book coaches with writers, but it's not a marketplace. These coaches actually work for me, and they are trained by me, they're hired by me, they're overseen by me. We have ongoing skill building, and we pair coaches with writers, because I don't as a user, I don't want to come into a marketplace and have to figure out for myself what I need. If I'm seeking help, it's probably because I don't know what I need. So we have this business model and this way of helping writers, and we're currently helping somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 writers on their projects. And what I realized after a while is people were starting to come to us to ask about this training that we were doing for the people that work for us. We have 32 book coaches working for us. Other people were saying, we would like that training. Can we take that training? Maybe they're a book coach or an editor or an agent or, some other person in the publishing industry. And without really even doing anything, we had a list of quite a lot of people who were interested in this training. So we took our training program and we codified it. And we're offering it now as a book coach certification program, where we will certify book coaches, and we have people going through the beta of it right now. And it's so exciting. It's so exciting because it's really there really is a system and a process and a strategy, and I have proven that I can teach it to other people, and then it's a thing, for whatever reason, is not being taught out in the publishing world.
I guess because we often, when we hear that word writing, we think of there's a mystical thing that's put around it, and obviously there is that whole part of writing, Julia Cameron and there's great people there. But actually, when I first heard about what you were doing, I obviously there's lots of individual writers. That's probably the bulk of the authors that are looking for that help. But I actually thought about it in terms of the number of big companies that I know now who are now finally starting to empower their employees and the people who work for them to be influencers, initially through social media. And I thought it's not that far a step away from if I'm leading GE or IBM or any of these kind of companies, say, actually, I've got this workforce who are coming up with these great ideas. There's probably a book, lots of books there. If you could bring in a book coach, an IBM book coach, I'm making something up here, but in order to start, teaching the employees within an organization, so you're producing this, and it could be in all different areas of an organization, because there's all this talent, there's all this knowledge that's stuck in there that could really help the world.
James, let's start a business together.
I know we have a couple of IBMers that listen. If anyone's from IBM or any of those kind of companies, just contact us. We have an idea for you.
Nothing better than to go with you into one of those companies, because 100%, and it doesn't have to necessarily be like, I helped this guy last year who runs a big financial services company in the Midwest. His name is on it. It's a big thing. And he's been in his industry forever. And he wanted to write a book to help the young people coming into his industry, because he felt that they were getting tactical training, but not getting this wisdom training. And so he wanted to write a book for them. This book was never going to be available in a bookstore or an airport. It was never going to be on a bestseller list, but he had a very clear purpose in mind and a very clear audience in mind. And he wrote a fantastic little book. It actually ended up with a basketball metaphor, because he had worked as a young man with a legendary Midwestern basketball coach, Bobby Knight. And so it had this basketball metaphor, but it was so effective at what he was trying to do, and it was so useful. And that's the kind of thing, there's people at every company that have that kind of knowledge. And what's interesting that's happening in businesses is young people have the tech knowledge and the way that the internet works in this fast-moving digital reality. And a lot of times older workers are slow to pick that up, but they have all the institutional knowledge. They have the wisdom. They've been through the trenches. And rather than discounting what they know because they don't know how to operate the technology, what an amazing thing to bring those two people together and their knowledge together. They could both write things for each other in some ways.
I know some organizations are starting to do this, not as much on the corporate side. I was speaking in India last week, and there was a gentleman there who runs something called the Himalayan writing retreats, which sounds great. I want to go on that. And he brings people to the Himalaya. He has a place in the Himalayas for 10-day writing retreats. And what he was saying, he said, I said, who are your customers? He has individual customers, but a lot of them, I think the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, they have these people that they bring under their wing in order to support them. It could be scientists, academics, influencers, people that are doing social good. And they basically send them there in order to write the book on their thing, in order to get that message out to a new world as well. So it's definitely, so these things are happening. So if anyone's watching this, listening to this just now, you need to get in touch with Jennie. Maybe this could be a thing for the future.
But James, here's the thing. Like when I hear that, I'm like, 10 days, 10 days. That's just like, that's just a minute. Like, come and work with me for 6 months or 9 months and we'll take you all the way through. That's what I think when I hear that is, that's nuts, 10 days. That's just barely time. I mean, I could do a lot in 10 days. I bet he can do a lot in 10 days with very motivated, smart people for sure. I'm not throwing him under the bus, but I would say, let me take you all the way to the end. Yeah.
So on that note, as we start to finish up here, I'd love to know a couple of quick fire questions from you. Do you have any online resources or tools or apps that you find really useful to help you in your writing?
I do. I thought about this when I saw your question, and the one, it's kind of a secret one that you wouldn't really know is there, but I use it all the time. It's called OneTab, and it's a bookmark app that helps you organize your bookmarks rather than the one that comes with your browser. It's this beautiful interface. It's the first thing I pull up every day. I've got projects organized in there with all the tabs, like really hundreds of tabs, and you can just, they're all right there. So when you want to pull them up, you just click on it and pull them up, and it's fantastic. It's free. It's crazy. One tab.
We'll put the link there. And if you were to recommend one book and one album to our listeners, what would those be?
That is just really, really, really hard. So for the book, I would say The Creative Habit, Tharp. And the reason for that is that Twyla Tharp in that book was the first person who got me to see and understand that creativity is not this mythical, mystical, magical thing. It's a thing you can cultivate. You can grow your skill. You can make the habit of it. It is available to anyone. And I think that book is profoundly important to anyone doing creative work. So I would say The Creative Habit. And for album, I would go with Paul Simon's Graceland. And the reason for that is I've been listening to it for, I don't know when it came out, a really long time, but he's got things in there about collaboration and experimentation and ideas and where ideas come from. He's telling so many stories about creativity in this album. Every song you listen to, and if you got the liner notes, that's like how old I am. The words about what he's doing, it's like, that's creativity in action right there, and you can hear it, and I love it. So I would go with that.
And he's great. He's one of those artists, he's continually evolving. I was listening to something, he was being interviewed the other day by Alec Baldwin, and I was listening to this interview that he did, and he's just constantly trying new things, new sounds, new ways of production as well. His mind is always going there. Fantastic artist. I want you to imagine now that you wake up tomorrow morning and you're going to have to start from scratch. So you have all the skills, all the knowledge that you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you and you know no one. You're going to have to restart. What would you do? How would you restart, Jennie?
I would restart by coaching the coaches. I would start by saying, I have a system and a strategy and a replicable process for helping people write better books, and I'm going to teach people how to do it so they can go out and teach other people. I don't think I would have spent 12 or 15 years helping individual writers one at a time. Not that I don't take huge joy in that. I do, and I do to this day, but the excitement of being able to spread this notion wide is what gets me up every day. So that's what I would do. I'd teach the teachers.
Teach the teachers. And what's the best way for people to learn more about this service so they can find out a bit more about it, how it all works, and also so they can find out more about you? Where's the best place for them to go and do that?
They can come to authoraccelerator.com, and we've put a special page for Creative Life listeners. It's authoraccelerator.com/creative life. And I'll put some of the resources here that we've discussed, these books and things we've discussed, and links to people interested in being coached or in perhaps becoming a coach.
Fantastic. What a wonderful offer. So we'll put that link there as well. Everyone can head along there. Jennie, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing all about your creative life.
Thank you for having me.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.